Tom stood nervously before the academic council of the Galactic University, his forearms clutching his research proposal. The grand hall's crystal ceiling sparkled with the light of 3 suns, but he felt only cold under the stern gazes of his professors. Earth. Professor Black's scales rippled with amusement. You want to study humans for your xenobiology thesis? Yes, Professor, Tom replied, trying to keep his voice steady. His skin shifted from its usual blue to a slightly purple shade, betraying his anxiety. Those Deathworlders. Another professor laughed, their tentacles waving dismissively. They're barely worth a footnote in our biology texts. They can't even regrow limbs. Tom took a deep breath. That's exactly why I want to study them, professors. Our data on humans is outdated. The last comprehensive study was done 50 years ago. Surely they deserve a fresh look. Professor Black leaned forward, his ancient eyes narrowing. Listen, young one. I've reviewed reports about Earth. Humans are soft creatures who need artificial clothing to survive. They sleep for a third of their day. They can't even see in the dark. What could you possibly learn from studying such primitive beings? With respect, Professor, Tom's voice grew stronger. Isn't it strange that such weak creatures have built cities across their harsh planet? They've survived ice ages, plagues, and countless natural disasters. There must be something we're missing. The council members exchanged glances. Professor Black sighed deeply, creating a small echo in the chamber. Very well. You may pursue this unusual choice. But remember, this thesis will determine your future in xenobiology. Are you certain you want to waste your time on humans? Yes, Professor. I've already arranged to attend one of their learning institutions, a university. As a transfer student, our disguise technology will let me observe them up close. At least choose a prestigious human institution. Professor Green interrupted, their antenna twitching with disapproval. Actually, I've selected a mid-sized university in what they call their Midwest region. It's more representative of average human behavior. The council members muttered among themselves. Finally, Professor Black spoke again. Your dedication to proper research methodology is noted, even if your subject choice is questionable. You have 1 Earth year to complete your study. Don't disappoint us. Later that day, Tom stood in his small dormitory room, packing his research equipment. His roommate, Bill, watched from the doorway. You're really going through with this? Bill asked, his second head shaking in disbelief. Studying humans. They can't even process toxic waste for nutrition. Tom carefully placed his atmospheric analyzer in its case. That's what makes them interesting. They're different from every other successful species we've studied. Don't you wonder how they've survived? No, both of Bill's heads replied simultaneously. But good luck. Try not to get crushed in their high gravity. Tom finished packing and activated his personal shield, standard equipment for any researcher visiting dangerous planets. Earth's gravity was indeed higher than he was used to, but his species' adaptable bone structure would help him adjust. As he prepared for teleportation to Earth, Tom reviewed his research objectives on his data pad. Document human physical limitations, study their survival strategies, and analyze their apparent weaknesses. Simple, straightforward, and sure to earn him an easy thesis approval. The teleportation beam hummed to life. Just before it activated, Tom smiled to himself. This would be the easiest research project ever. After all, how impressive could these humans really be? The beam engaged, and Tom vanished in a flash of light, completely unaware that he was about to begin the most shocking and perspective-changing year of his life. Tom's first week on Earth left him completely confused. His disguise as a human student worked perfectly. The advanced holographic technology made him appear as an average 20-year-old male student. But what he observed made no sense at all. On his first morning, he witnessed something that went against all his research. A human student was running around the campus lake, sweating heavily and breathing hard. "Are you being chased?" Tom asked, ready to call emergency services on his hidden communicator. The runner stopped, wiping his forehead. "Nah, just doing my morning jog. Gotta stay in shape." Tom blinked in confusion. "You're deliberately making yourself tired and uncomfortable." "Yeah, training for a marathon next month." The runner smiled and continued his exercise, leaving Tom frantically taking notes on his disguised datapad. Things only got stranger in the university library. Tom watched in horror as students carried stacks of books that must have weighed several kilograms. According to his research, humans had relatively weak backs and needed constant rest. Yet here they were, carrying heavy loads while also balancing drinks in their hands. During lunch break, Tom experienced his biggest shock yet. He sat next to a student who was eating something that made his advanced sensors go crazy. "What is that?" he asked, pointing at the red sauce on the student's plate. "Oh, this? Just some extra spicy wings. Want to try one?" Tom politely declined, but his sensors indicated the food contained capsaicin, a chemical that caused pain. These humans were voluntarily eating pain-inducing substances for pleasure. He sent an urgent message to Professor Black. "Humans appear to seek out physical stress and discomfort. Request immediate clarification." The professor's reply was dismissive. Obviously a small sample of abnormal behavior. Focus on documenting their weaknesses. But that evening, Tom witnessed something that made him question everything he'd been taught. A small human female was moving into the dormitory, carrying a large box labeled books. His sensors indicated the box weighed approximately 25 kilograms. Tom watched, expecting her to ask for help or use some kind of anti-gravity device. Instead, she carried the box up 3 flights of stairs by herself. When she reached the top, she was breathing heavily but smiling. "Just 2 more boxes to go," she announced cheerfully to no one in particular. Tom quickly pulled out his datapad and began a new entry. Day 7 observations. Humans voluntarily engage in physical stress. They carry heavy loads without technological assistance. They consume pain-inducing substances for enjoyment. They appear to take pride in physical exertion. Current xenobiology textbooks may require updating. Later that night, while reviewing the day's notes in his room, Tom heard loud music from the floor above. He went to investigate and found humans moving rhythmically, dancing, according to his research, for hours without rest. "Don't they get tired?" he muttered to himself, watching in amazement as the humans continued their energetic movements. His roommate, Jack, overheard him. "Tired? It's only midnight. The party's just getting started." Tom returned to his room and stared at his datapad. Everything he'd observed contradicted his species' understanding of humans. They weren't showing any signs of the weakness he'd expected to document. Instead, they seemed to actively seek out physical challenges. He sent one final message to Professor Black before going to bed. Request permission to revise research objectives. Humans displaying unexpected characteristics. The professor's reply came quickly. Stick to the original plan. You're letting their primitive world cloud your judgment. Tom looked at the message and then at his notes. For the first time in his academic career, he wondered if his professors might be wrong. Very wrong indeed. He fell asleep that night with a troubling thought. What else had they gotten wrong about humans? Tom stared at his class schedule with growing concern. To maintain his cover as a student, he had to take something called physical education. His research indicated it was a basic fitness class, perfect for observing human limitations. He couldn't have been more wrong. The gymnasium was a large, echoing space, filled with various metal contraptions that humans called exercise equipment. Tom arrived early, wearing the required gym clothes and trying to look normal. "All right, everyone," the instructor, Coach Rob, called out to the class. "Today we're doing circuit training. 10 stations, 2 minutes each, then rotate. Give it everything you've got." Tom watched in growing horror as the students actually smiled at this announcement. His sensors indicated they were excited rather than terrified. The first station nearly made Tom break his cover. A human was lifting a metal bar loaded with weights, then putting it down, only to lift it again. His sensors indicated the bar weighed more than 50 kilograms. "Why do you keep lifting it if you're just going to put it back down?" Tom whispered to the student next to him. "To get stronger, of course," the student replied between lifts, sweat dripping down his face. "No pain, no gain." Tom quickly noted in his hidden data pad, "Humans deliberately damage muscle tissue to promote growth. They appear to enjoy this process." At the next station, humans were running in place on machines while staring at screens showing virtual paths. Their heart rates were elevated, they were sweating profusely, and yet they kept going. Some even increased the machine's speed. "Pick up the pace," Coach Rob shouted encouragingly. "Push yourselves." Tom tried to maintain his disguise while doing the minimum possible effort. But then came the burpees station. Down on the ground, then jump up, then back down. Coach Rob demonstrated. "As many as you can in 2 minutes." Tom watched in disbelief as humans threw themselves down, pushed themselves up, jumped into the air, and then willingly repeated this torturous cycle. His environmental sensors were going crazy trying to make sense of the energy expenditure. "You okay there?" Coach Rob approached Tom, who was standing frozen in shock. "First time working out?" "Yes," Tom managed to reply. I'm not used to this." "No problem. Start slow, listen to your body. You'll be surprised what you can do when you push yourself." "Push yourself." Tom's translator must be malfunctioning. Why would anyone want to push themselves toward exhaustion? The next station involved humans hanging from bars and pulling themselves up repeatedly. Tom's species had 4 arms, but even he found it impressive that humans could support their entire body weight with just 2 limbs. By the end of the class, Tom was hiding in the bathroom, frantically sending a message to his home world. Urgent update. Humans intentionally expose themselves to physical stress. They appear to thrive on it. Most concerning discovery. They teach their young to do this in specialized training facilities. Request immediate guidance. The response from Professor Black was immediate. "Clearly, you're misinterpreting their actions. Perhaps it's a religious ritual." But Tom knew what he'd seen. As he left the gymnasium, he overheard 2 students talking. "Great workout today." "Yeah, but wait till you try the advanced class." There was an advanced class. Tom quickly checked his datapad. Yes, there it was. Advanced physical training, where humans apparently did everything he'd just witnessed, but more intensely. That evening, Tom sat in his room, reviewing the day's recordings. The data was clear. Humans didn't just tolerate physical stress. They actively sought it out, celebrated it, and encouraged others to do the same. He added a final note to his research log. Previous studies severely underestimated human physical capabilities. Their willingness to endure discomfort for self-improvement suggests a psychological trait unique among known species. Further investigation required. As he prepared for bed, Tom heard students in the hallway discussing something called mountain climbing for the weekend. He decided not to ask what that was. He'd had enough shocks for one day. The city was buzzing with unusual energy early Sunday morning. Tom had never seen so many humans gathered in one place. Thousands of them lined the streets, wearing lightweight clothing despite the cool morning air. "What's happening?" Tom asked his roommate Jack, who was pinning a number to his shirt. "It's the annual city marathon. I'm running it this year." Jack grinned. "Want to watch?" Tom checked his datapad. A marathon. 42195 kilometers of continuous running. Surely this was a mistake. The whole distance, without stopping. That's the plan. Some people might walk a bit, but most runners finish in under 5 hours. Tom's external sensors nearly shorted out. 5 hours of continuous physical exertion. His professors had taught that humans needed frequent rest periods due to their inefficient biology. At the starting line, Tom was shocked to see the diversity of participants. Young humans stood next to elderly ones. Some humans appeared physically fit, while others had body types his textbooks would classify as unsuited for endurance activities. A loud horn blasted, and thousands of humans started running. Tom followed the race route on his hover scooter, disguised as a bicycle, taking readings with his sensors. After the first hour, something extraordinary happened. The runners didn't stop. They didn't collapse. Instead, they had formed small groups, talking and encouraging each other while maintaining their pace. "Water station ahead," volunteers shouted, holding out cups. Tom watched in amazement as runners grabbed water without breaking stride, some even coordinating their movements to share drinks with others. His data pad was filling with unprecedented readings. The humans' bodies were operating at sustained high-performance levels that should have been impossible according to his stenobiology textbooks. At the halfway point, Tom spotted something that made him question everything he knew. An elderly human female, his sensors estimated around 70 Earth years old, was steadily passing younger runners. "Amazing, isn't she?" a spectator commented, noticing Tom's stare. "That's Mrs. White. She's run this marathon every year for the past 30 years. Tom quickly calculated. This human had voluntarily run over 1,200 kilometers just in marathons, not counting training. He sent an urgent update to his home world. Humans demonstrate extraordinary endurance capabilities. Age appears to be less limiting than previously thought. Request immediate update to xenobiology databases. The response was frustratingly dismissive. Focus on documenting their limitations, not their anomalies. But as the race continued, Tom couldn't find the limitations he was supposed to document. Instead, he witnessed scenes that defied explanation. A runner fell, scraping their knee. Instead of quitting, they got up and continued running. Two humans helped a struggling third runner, supporting them between their shoulders, all three moving forward together. A visually impaired runner completed the course with a guide, connected by a small rope between them. Near the finish line, Tom watched Jack complete the marathon. His roommate was drenched in sweat, clearly exhausted, but wearing a huge smile. "How do you feel?" Tom asked, genuinely curious. "Tired, but awesome." Jack panted. "Think I'll sign up for the ultra marathon next month." "Ultra marathon? Yeah, it's twice this distance." Tom excused himself and found a quiet spot to process this information. He pulled out his data pad and made a new entry. Marathon observation conclusions. Humans can maintain physical activity for hours without stopping. They participate in endurance events voluntarily and repeatedly. Age and physical condition are not as limiting as previously thought. They help others at their own expense. They celebrate exhaustion as an achievement. Some seek even greater physical challenges. That evening, while other students celebrated their marathon achievements, Tom sat in his room, rewriting large sections of his research. Every piece of data pointed to one undeniable fact. Humans weren't just surviving on their harsh planet. They were constantly pushing the boundaries of what his people thought possible. And somehow, Tom suspected, the marathon was just the beginning of his discoveries about human capabilities. Tom's research took an unexpected turn when the university began constructing a new science building next to his dormitory. His initial annoyance at the noise turned to fascination as he watched the human workers. The morning temperature was just above freezing, with a bitter wind that made Tom increase his personal shield's heat settings. Yet the construction workers wore only light protective gear as they moved around the site. "This is highly irregular," Tom muttered, adjusting his sensors. The workers were lifting heavy materials, operating large machines, and climbing steel frameworks in conditions his species would consider hostile. During his lunch break, Tom sat on a nearby bench, pretending to eat a sandwich while documenting the construction crew's activities. A worker named Mike sat down next to him, pulling out a steaming container from his lunchbox. "Quite a sight, isn't it?" Mike gestured at the rising framework. "We'll have the basic structure up by the end of the month." Tom nearly dropped his datapad. "But the weather forecast predicts snow next week." Mike shrugged, taking a bite of his lunch. "Yeah, we'll probably need to wear extra layers." "No big deal. The work's gotta get done." Later that afternoon, it started raining. Tom expected the workers to seek shelter. Instead, they put on thin waterproof coverings and continued working. His sensors indicated the temperature had dropped further, yet the human showed no signs of stopping. Urgent observation, Tom recorded in his notes. Humans continue physical labor in adverse conditions without apparent distress. Previous studies suggesting they require optimal conditions may be severely flawed. He watched as a worker carried 3 heavy steel beams on her shoulder, walking across uneven ground with remarkable balance. According to his calculations, each beam weighed at least 40 kilograms. "Need any help there, Lisa?" another worker called out. "Nah, I got it," she replied cheerfully, adjusting the beam's position slightly. "This is nothing compared to last month's project." Tom's data pad pinged with warnings about impossible bioreadings. He had to recalibrate his sensors 3 times that day, convinced they were malfunctioning. The most shocking moment came when a delivery truck arrived with building materials. The driver, an older human male, single-handedly unloaded massive concrete blocks using a simple hand truck. "How long have you been doing this work?" Tom asked the driver, trying to understand. "About 30 years now." The driver smiled, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Started when I was 20. Best job in the world. Keeps me strong." Tom quickly calculated. This human had been performing intense physical labor for 3 decades, yet showed no signs of the deterioration his textbooks predicted. As the afternoon wore on, the wind grew stronger. Metal beams swayed dangerously overhead. Tom watched in amazement as workers secured safety lines and continued working at height, their movements confident and precise. "Site supervisor says we're ahead of schedule," one worker called down from the framework. "Might finish early this week." Tom sent another message to his professors. Construction observation indicates humans routinely perform physical feats that should be beyond their capabilities. They appear to derive satisfaction from challenging conditions. Professor Black's reply was typically dismissive. "Remember, these are just isolated examples. Focus on documenting their obvious limitations." But Tom was starting to doubt there were any obvious limitations to document. He watched as the workers coordinated complex lifts, balanced on narrow beams, and solved structural challenges with remarkable efficiency. At the end of the day, Tom made his final notes. Construction site findings. Humans work effectively in adverse weather conditions. They carry loads far exceeding recommended limits. Physical capabilities appear to improve with regular use. Age does not significantly impair their ability to perform heavy labor. They maintain high morale despite challenging conditions. As Tom walked back to his dorm, he heard the workers discussing plans for tomorrow. Apparently, the forecast predicted even worse weather. "Just another day on the job," one of them laughed. Tom shook his head in wonder. Every day on Earth seemed to reveal new aspects of human resilience that his species had completely underestimated. The weather forecast had warned of severe storms, but nothing had prepared Tom for the intensity of an Earth thunderstorm. Wind howled through campus as lightning split the sky. His sensors were overwhelmed by the atmospheric readings. From his dorm room window, Tom watched trees bending in the wind. His data pad displayed multiple weather alerts. The university had sent messages advising all students to stay indoors. Then the power went out. In the darkness, Tom heard shouts from outside. His enhanced vision showed him a terrifying sight. Part of the old library roof had collapsed, and water was pouring in. There might be students trapped inside. Someone yelled. Before Tom could process what was happening, he saw humans running toward the library. Not away from danger, but straight into it. His translator must be malfunctioning again. Everyone grabbed something to help. Jack, his roommate, was already putting on a raincoat. "We need flashlights, rope, anything useful." Tom watched in disbelief as students and staff organized themselves into teams within minutes. They weren't waiting for emergency services. They weren't seeking shelter. They were taking action. The basement. A librarian shouted through the rain. "There are study groups down there." Tom's sensors indicated the storm was intensifying. The temperature was dropping, the wind speed was dangerous, and the lightning created electrical hazards. According to every safety protocol he knew, these conditions required immediate evacuation. Instead, he watched humans form a chain, passing books and equipment out of the flooding basement. They worked in the freezing rain, their clothes soaked, yet their movements remained coordinated and purposeful. "We need more help at the north entrance," someone called out. To Tom's amazement, even more humans rushed to assist. His datapad was filling with impossible readings, elevated heart rates, extreme physical exertion, exposure to dangerous conditions, yet the humans showed no signs of stopping. In the basement, water was rising rapidly. Tom overheard a rescue team's conversation. Two students trapped in the archive room. "The door's stuck. Stand back." Three humans combined their strength, pushing against the swollen door until it burst open. They emerged minutes later carrying two students and several boxes of valuable documents. Tom sent a frantic message to his homeworld. Humans display unprecedented emergency response capabilities. They intentionally risk personal safety to assist others. Previous understanding of their survival instincts requires complete revision. The response from Professor Black was delayed. Surely they're waiting for proper emergency response teams. Tom looked out the window again. The official emergency teams had arrived, but instead of taking over, they seamlessly integrated with the student volunteers. Humans in uniforms worked alongside humans in casual clothes, all focused on a single goal. The storm raged for hours. Tom documented scenes that contradicted everything he'd been taught. A small female student carried 3 children through flood waters. Elderly faculty members organized supply chains. Injured humans refused to leave until others were safe. Complete strangers coordinated complex rescue operations. By midnight, the worst had passed. The library was secured, all students were accounted for, and emergency teams were handling the cleanup. Tom watched as the volunteers finally allowed themselves to rest, many still shivering in wet clothes. That was incredible teamwork, everyone. The university dean addressed the gathered crowd. "You should all be proud." Tom made his final notes of the night. Emergency response analysis. Humans instinctively assist others despite personal risk. They organize effectively without formal hierarchy. Physical discomfort appears irrelevant during crisis. They demonstrate remarkable problem-solving under pressure. Social bonds strengthen in dangerous situations. Later, in his room, Tom heard students in the hallway already planning to help with repairs tomorrow. He slumped in his chair, staring at his datapad. Every assumption about human limitations had been shattered. They weren't just surviving on their harsh world. They were mastering it, protecting each other, and even finding strength in adversity. And Tom was beginning to suspect that this display of human capability was only scratching the surface. Tom stood once again before the Academic Council of the Galactic University, but this time, his 4 arms weren't trembling. His skin glowed with confidence as he prepared to present his findings. "Before I begin," Tom announced, his voice clear and strong, "I must confess that every assumption in our previous studies about humans was wrong." The council chamber erupted in murmurs. Professor Black's scales darkened with disapproval. "That's a very bold claim, young one." "The evidence is undeniable," Tom continued, activating his holographic display. "Humans aren't just surviving on their death world. They're thriving in ways we never imagined possible." The display showed scenes from his year on Earth, the marathon runners pushing through exhaustion, construction workers operating in harsh conditions, and students responding to the library emergency. "Our textbooks claim humans are weak because they can't regrow limbs or survive extreme temperatures without protection," Tom explained. "But we completely misunderstood their true strength." He pulled up his research data. Humans don't just accept their physical limitations, they actively work to overcome them. They deliberately expose themselves to stress to become stronger. They run vast distances for entertainment. They lift heavy weights repeatedly. not because they must, but because they choose to. Professor Green's antennae twitched nervously, but their biology is so inefficient, they require constant rest. With respect, Professor, Tom interrupted, they turn these supposed weaknesses into advantages. Yes, they sleep daily. Then they wake up and push themselves beyond what any of us thought possible. They don't just endure their harsh world. They challenge themselves to adapt to it. The holographic display showed clips from the gym class and construction site. Several council members gasped at the weights humans were lifting. Most remarkably, Tom continued, humans demonstrate extraordinary psychological resilience. When faced with danger, they don't just flee. They often run toward it to help others. During the storm emergency, I watched humans risk their lives to save not just their fellow humans, but even their cultural artifacts. Professor Black rose from his seat. This is absurd. You're suggesting we reclassify humans as a dominant species. No, Professor, Tom replied calmly. I'm suggesting we recognize them as something far more interesting, a species that constantly evolves through deliberate challenge. They don't just survive. They deliberately seek out ways to become stronger, both individually and as a group. Tom displayed his final data summary. Humans are capable of sustained physical effort that would exhaust most known species. They can adapt to almost any environment. They demonstrate remarkable problem-solving abilities under pressure. And most importantly, they show an almost infinite capacity for self-improvement. The council chamber fell silent. Finally, Professor Black spoke. Are you suggesting that we've been underestimating humans all this time? Not just underestimating, Tom answered. We've been fundamentally wrong about them. They're not weak. They're among the most formidable species we've ever encountered. And they're getting stronger every day. The implications of Tom's report spread quickly through the galactic academic community. Within weeks, universities across the galaxy were revising their xenobiology textbooks. Several research institutions launched new studies of human capabilities. As for Tom, he received the highest honors for his thesis. But more importantly, he had one final message to send to Earth before returning home. Dear Jack, thank you for being an excellent roommate. You humans constantly surprise me. Keep running those marathons. You're more extraordinary than you know. Your friend, Tom. Back in his dormitory at the Galactic University, Tom looked at his Earth souvenirs. A marathon medal Jack had given him, a piece of the library roof, and a construction worker's hard hat. Each item reminded him of how wrong his people had been about humans. His data pad pinged with a new message. The Galactic Science Academy wanted him to lead a new long-term study of human potential. Tom smiled, his skin turning a bright shade of happy blue. The galaxy was finally beginning to understand what he had learned. Never underestimate humans. They will always surprise you.